I started programming very early when I was like 12. So I'm 35 now. So that was 2002. I'm 90. And back then the web was very raw. It was in a time where JavaScript was like the devil. So HTML, CSS era. You still had to optimize every website for every browser separately, and it was horrible. It took me a long time to understand why I'm here. I saw so much negative stuff, so many scams, so many people without a great why. It took me 1.5 years to 2 years to understand the systemic impact it could have, and the global impact it could have, and the philosophical impact it could have. But I needed to work my way towards that. And funny enough, right now, this is the #1 meta. It's like meta level aggregation, the DeFi mullet, essentially. It's like, how do we get millions or billions of people on chain fast, easy, without companies having to have lengthy, research-heavy go-to-market strategies? With LI.FI, you have one SDK, and you can onboard people to crypto and swap any asset on any chain and bridge it if necessary. You don't even have to care about that. It's just happening. And you get the best price because we have a smart auto routing, but you also have an intent system, so an auction. So third parties are competing to provide the best price and fulfill the order. Yeah, still working on the same thing.
Hey, Philip, it's great to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So for all of these, I like to start at the beginning and just get a sense of who you are. So if you could start with where you're from, and then maybe what was the first interest that you remember having where you were like, okay, this is a thing that I could spend my life pursuing?
I'm from Germany. I grew up in the Midwest, smaller city, 250,000 citizens. I live in Berlin for 10 years, but I've been traveling a lot. I started programming very early when I was like 12. So I'm 35 now. So that was 2002. I'm 90. And back then the web was very raw. It was in a time where JavaScript was like the devil. So HTML, CSS era. You still had to optimize every browser, each website for every browser separately, and it was horrible. And so what sparked my interest in spending my time in Web3 was I got into a hackathon by coincidence. A friend of mine was asking me to help him out, and I did. And then dealing with the Ethers.js documentation reminded me of 2002, literally. It reminded me on how badly documented things are. It was like everything, how RPCs were documented. It all felt very much done in a rush. That was not a bad sign. It was a symptom of something that was growing fast, right? People were too busy to write the documentation nicely. So I was seeing this from a positive side. So I was calling my co-founder, and I'm already calling him co-founder because we have been co-founders for over 10 years before this. So we've been working together for 14 years now and built multiple companies in gaming, biotech, marketplace intelligence, had projects, and we tried to stay alive in any way possible. And I was calling him, I was like, hey, this was super fun, this hackathon. Let's do another one. There's one coming next month. It was around interoperability between blockchains. And we really didn't understand anything at that point, like how blockchain works, what an AMM is, what a bridge is. However, we met the Connects team and we always solved big data problems. So we had a good understanding of databases. In looking at all of this and the high gas prices and bridges, it was very clear like the space is going to be multi-chain. And then we were very excited to do something with it, to do something with aggregation, with data, with abstraction. And so LI.FI was born 1.5 months after having installed my first wallet.
Wow, you're quick. Cool. Okay, and I want to get into LeFi, but I want to go back to how you first met Max. How did you first start to work together and build businesses together?
That's actually quite a cute story. So that was 2020, I believe. And we were studying in the same city, Passau. And Passau is surrounded by 3 rivers that are flowing together, which means the city every now and then gets flooded. Essentially, every year it gets flooded. But we had the flood of the century. And that means water was like almost 13 meters high. So many people lost their apartments and living spaces. And then
Wow.
students were to rebuild the city. So we had thousands of voluntary workers and they need to be coordinated. I was victim of the flood myself, so I was writing a small app to coordinate volunteers. And the university who was working with the city and all the workers were using that app to coordinate helpers. And then other cities that got flooded at that time too adopted it as well. And then Max was working at the IT department in the university while studying. He was contacting me, asked me if he could help me somehow. And then he came in, refactor this whole thing within 24 hours. And I was looking at the code. I was like, okay, I like this guy. Well done. And yeah, since then I pitched him another idea I had. And from there, we started building a company, essentially.
Cool. And in your time together, it seems like you've crossed a lot of different industries and approached a lot of different problems. How do you go about pitching ideas? How do you become passionate about something across different industries? How do you familiarize yourself in that process?
Those are a few things. So the way I immerse myself in industries is a very clear process for me by now. I did this in biotech, which was very hard to do. It was probably the hardest to get into. And I did it in crypto. And it's essentially, I'm getting really organized around the topic, really organized. Like from writing my own glossary to writing an introduction guide. I literally wrote like a 40-pager on crypto, on how to introduce anyone into crypto. I did that to understand this myself and try to structure the document by doing that and creating that structure for myself and refining and reiterating on that structure. As I understand the market better and see relations and know how to organize things, I get a good deep market understanding. You have to teach in order to learn. So that's a process. I did that in biotech where we were doing neoantigen prediction.
Hmm.
It's like you do a DNA and RNA sequence analysis and you predict how likely is it that a certain protein causes an immune response in a cancer patient. And I have never touched biology before. So I had to start with biology 101, chemistry 101, and then understand the core processes from RNA polymerase, from gene to transcriptome to RNA, and how everything alongside that work with the enzymes and alternative splices and proteomics at the end of this and like getting a good idea on how complex is it and how much of that can I actually tackle and learn. And I did the
Yeah.
same in crypto. That's one thing. Another, and this is just like you have to become obsessed and really put in the work. There's no shortcut to you
Mm-hmm.
really understanding something
Mm-hmm.
fast. You have to go deep. So I was summarizing whiteboard crypto videos, for example, just to get there. But I was writing it down and then extending my glossary and whatever. Yeah. And then the other part of the question was,
Now I'm
sorry.
actually interested in hearing more about this. It seems that becomes part of the allure, I guess, the opportunity to learn a new industry.
Yes, this is if you enter a new space, you need to how do you become better than everyone else, right? And how do you catch up with everyone in the first place? Can you be taken serious by people that are supposed to invest in you? I don't mean investors by that, talent, people to follow you. How do you become a leader? You have to be very proficient and well spoken around the topics you're dealing with on a daily basis. And then you
Yeah.
have to understand what you're doing. And you have then to combine this with your skills, leadership, technically, or whatever. But you have to picture a vision. And for that, you need to understand the environment you're in. And that's just like doing homework.
Yeah. How much time do you give yourself to catch up to everybody?
There was no time limit on that. It was like constant process, but I did it was for as long as necessary to be able to take my next step, which was getting venture capital or hire the first talent. So this was, and then at some point you simply don't have the time anymore to maintain this document. But I spent 6 months on it.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Going forward to your crypto journey. So a month and a half after you got your first wallet, you founded LI.FI. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about your process and catching up in this industry.
that was essentially it, right? Like creating this document, reading up on it, and using all the tools, all the learning techniques possible, from listening to podcasts to watching videos to summarizing them to reading up on certain papers like the Bitcoin white paper, the Ethereum white paper, these things, and asking questions and then getting answers to it. Unfortunately, back then there was no ChatGPT. So nowadays this is much easier
It is.
to find an entry into these things. But I feel like it's, if you give a speech, the best work you can do is create the presentation, because as you create the presentation and you speak it out aloud, like just refining the slides,
Yeah.
it really makes sure that what you want to talk about sits. It was the same thing.
Yeah, totally. More embodied.
I remember my first interview with Jason Choi back then, who was quite a name back then. He was prominent and he took me on his podcast, and then he was asking me so many questions I didn't have good answers to. It was embarrassing. I was so embarrassed. It was my first interview in the space, and it was immediately a high profile one. And then he was asking all these technical questions, and I was like, fuck, I have no good answers, not at all. So I was stuttering my way through it. Was a good learning.
Yeah, indeed. So when was the first moment that you felt like you had conviction in the space?
To be honest, it took me a long time to understand why I'm here.
Hmm.
I saw so much negative stuff, so many scams, so many people without a great why. It took me 1.5 years to 2 years to understand the systemic impact it could have, and the global impact it could have, and the philosophical impact it could have. But I needed to work my way towards that. There was work.
Yeah.
So we had two other topics before that. So between biotech and this, there were two other topics, but let's then leave aside for now. I think the biotech topic got me into, let me experience something that was really hard to catch up to. It was like I never had as much purpose and meaning as when I was building this biotech topic, helping cancer patients. I was helping people directly and on a life or death scenario, because essentially you do this neoantigen prediction to predict how likely is it that this immune therapy would work. And it's very important because immune therapy, you do this last second. You do this with stage 4 cancer patients that are supposed to die, essentially. That's where you apply immune therapy today. Or it's changing now, but this becomes available for more early stage. But typically, these things are still in testing. So you do this with late stage. This is your last hope. And if you can spare him the experiment, you can maybe go for different treatment, or you can save a lot of money and hope. And it's like the emotions that came with it were incredible. And I was missing this in crypto. Now I can see much more of the global impact this could have. But it is a different feeling.
So do you feel like you have the emotional connection to it at this point? Has that emerged in the same way, or at least in a similar way as you were feeling when you were doing biotech?
Sometimes I think my passion has been created around lots of things. First of all, the company and the organism it is, and building this organism is incredible to watch and to deal with, and also what it means on myself, for myself, like how I have to grow as a leader. Very exciting journey. So those are two very strong drivers for me. Just the pure abstracted form of what I'm doing is very exciting to me. But at the same time, I'm also very excited about, and that's where I'm German, like the efficiency we are bringing into this world. For me, it's like I have finally, and I wrote an article about this, unfortunately on LinkedIn, but it was like the internet brought people together, connectivity, and the blockchain brings humanity together on another level, a level of like on an exchange level, which is super important. Exchange of everything, exchange of information, which can actually, even if being able to monetize information, which can be represented in token, which is what LLMs need. Crypto, it's all very connected. If you just abstract everything around tokens, I highly recommend to read the latest Ribbit Capital token ledger. Great work. Starting with everything can be represented in tokens. Now this gets exciting. Now, like being able to monetize everything also
Mm.
means you create more access, or can mean to create more access to everything, and making everything more interconnected and more transparent. And it just brings humanity together on a global level, and it's necessary to grow together with AI towards space, towards a global united community. And like there is so much to it. So I'm very excited about so many things that are related to the blockchain. Yes, bunch of exciting topics.
Good. I can hear the emotion in your voice. It is a beautiful vision, one of connectivity. When I asked you, you said sometimes you feel this emotional impact, an emotional vision. What are the times you don't?
The majority of the time, I don't. The majority of the time, I'm busy with my company, and the company. It's so funny. I was talking to friends recently about this. The relationship to your company could be a toxic relationship. It's so
Mm.
many up and downs, and you get addicted to it. It's like it's an emotional dependency you are
Mm.
developing, and your behavior around this, all your habits, like grabbing your phone all the time, reading all the messages, working long hours. It's an addiction. Literally is an addiction. So finding, but so I'm, this is so all encompassing and so mind filling. There's very little room to sit down and question, why am I doing it? And, but because this, as I told you, my personal journey and the organization I'm building gives me enough purpose, I don't have to sit down very often to ask me, why am I here?
Yeah.
What gets me into asking, why am I here, is whenever I have to raise the next round, because
Mm.
then it's not about selling what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's about selling what will I do. So I have to anticipate the future. I have to paint a picture, a worldview, and in best case, I create a worldview that is shared with my investors. That's funny enough why I was recommending like the Ribbit Capital Tokenizer, because that was great to read. It was like that aligns with my thinking, and yeah, that's when I get to lean back sometimes and just reflect on and try to paint a picture. Like whenever I have to race the next round, essentially.
How has that picture changed throughout life of LI.FI in terms of the origin, the initial kernel of this idea to some of the more contemporary innovations like intents and resource locks? How has that why evolved for you and for the company?
The vision, when you talk about vision, you always have to, I think that's where vision and mission exists. Vision is kind of where is this supposed to go? It's vision aligns more with the TAM, the total available market. And then the mission is more like, how do you get there? Whom are you helping to do what? And that's more the current state. And that has certainly changed as the space has been changing and as the space got allowed to interact with new players. So 3 years ago, we didn't have to talk about Revolut. It was not there, essentially. Didn't have to talk about RWAs. We're not really, I mean, there was some gossip around securities. I think it was in 2021, 2, something like that. But yeah, certainly the mission constantly changed as we needed to adjust target group and product positioning. But overall, I have to say, LI.FI's vision and also mission never changed much compared to other protocols or companies, I would say. It was always very clear what we wanted to do, that we want to help companies to come into the space, aggregate, and abstract away everything. And funny enough, right now, this is the number one meta. It's like meta level aggregation, the DeFi mullet, essentially. It's like, how do we get millions or billions of people on chain fast, easy, without companies having to have lengthy, research heavy go to market strategies? With LI.FI, you have one SDK and you can onboard people to crypto and swap any asset on any chain and bridge it if necessary. You don't even have to care about that. It's just happening, and you get the best price because we have a smart order routing, but you also have an intent system, so an auction. So third parties are competing to provide the best price and fulfill the order. Yeah, still working on the same thing.
Cool. Yeah, and you mentioned some of the players that you didn't have to think about and now you do. Who are the ones that that you find yourself thinking about most? And how do you think about LI.FI's core differentiators? What is your moat? And then where do you see opportunities for collaboration versus competition?
I think the competitive environment is constantly changing. If it's arguably a big thing for LI.FI was always we would aggregate people, and we therefore had a good positioning to get integrated by other businesses. So we got the order flow and we were distributing the order flow to underlying players, to single purpose players. Single purpose players would be DEX aggregators, DEXs, bridges. And now, as we have grown a lot on both ends, means we have many DEX aggregators, we have many bridges, so it's very competitive for them. And we have a lot of order flow, means they are very dependent on us often, while at the same time are getting squeezed to zero, which is not healthy, right? So I think we're in the process of figuring out how can we drive a marketplace model that is fair, because we don't want to squeeze them to the bottom. At the same time, we also need to make money. So I think we are in a very transitionary state of transitioning from an aggregation play to a marketplace and finding a business model that allows us to be profitable and grow fast while satisfying businesses as we have been doing, and then order flow fillers, solvers, and any form of exchange down below. It's complex. And I think the biggest problem is that the space is still too small. If we had more order flow, if the pie would be bigger, then there would be more to distribute and make others happy. And then also just putting everyone into a competition is probably not helpful. You need to categorize it more and let people compete in product. I think there is something. There are we have lots of ideas on how to create a healthier environment for the people that fulfill our orders. And that's the challenge we are facing right now. And you can call everyone that supplies to us, you can call them frenemies. They are friends because we bring them order flow and they like us for that. But sometimes we're enemies because we both go for the same direct integration. Obviously, they're trying to get direct integrations and circumvent us. Sometimes they're successful, most often they're not. And for an enterprise, it really makes sense to work with us versus them. We always have a superior solution and fail safety and monitoring and better coverage. And on so many levels, it is smarter for business from a go-to-market perspective to work with us trying to assess any individual single-purpose player. In that sense, we have a winning market positioning. That's it. But then there is integrity, and then there's attitude, and our value system and our attitude towards these players, that we actually want to create a healthy environment where they can survive. We don't want to go down. We are going down a bit ourselves to be able to have redundancy we control. Just because we are getting into more enterprise businesses, we need to fulfill service level agreements. So it can become very costly because it's a transactional market. So if we have a fallout, people are not making money. So you could the thing becomes costly fast. So service level agreements are becoming more and more important. We're doubling down on that as well as compliance. And yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to a better communication concept with these people. And we are working on this.
Cool. Cool. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by communication concept?
Just like being more, I think we need to be more outspoken about how we think about executing down the line. But again, it was more about how do we create redundancy for enterprises. So that means our solver is not meant to be competitive. It just needs to be there. And the second is, how can we expand independently of third parties? Whenever we were expanding to a new chain, we had to ask all the bridges, hey, are you going to be on Plasma day one? And then we had to ask all the DEX aggregators, hey, are you going to be on Plasma on day one? And can you tell us? And then it was hard to coordinate everything and launch on the same day as then, because obviously also we need testing, and it's just like tricky. It's a lot of what we do is relationship management, actually. And yeah, by having our own solutions, we can make the first step ourselves and then let others follow, and we have less stress and we can satisfy our customer demands in that regard.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I like the attention that you're giving to, you've said it a couple times, healthy environment and thinking about integrity and attitude and having those be two pillars that sit alongside your business model. Do you worry ever about in other organizations who care less about those pillars, care more about the margins, and thus perhaps might gain a competitive advantage
In the end
by
of the day,
doing
it's business. Sure, I'm worried about it because just because we have the right attitude doesn't mean people have an understanding for that. And people always try to maximize value for themselves. It's just a human. But so yes, of course, I'm worried about competition. Like there's a good book, I think Andy Grove. It's like Only the Paranoid Survives. I'm fucking paranoid. When we are executing all in a constantly paranoid state, now we are very alarmed and we see a lot. And we take any nuance in behavioral change from any adversity. We smell it from afar and are talking a lot about these things. Yeah, but we also have people that said, no, we will not go adverse and we will play along and let's rather find deals and have 50-50 rev share on certain things and very collaborative and outspoken and with a high degree of vulnerability as well. Hey, these things really suck. It doesn't work for us. We hate our market positioning. This is tricky. This is difficult. It's very interesting to see because we're now in a position of leverage by now. And very interesting to see, like in towards many players, not towards everyone, but towards many players, we have leverage. So it's very interesting to see how they react, starting with body language to what are they saying, how is their behavior changing, and so on. For us, we are also a later stage company, and for us, it's important to make money now too. There are other protocols with 10 people teams that do so much money. It's ridiculous. And then you have to reflect on your business model and you're like, then you hate your own business model. But then again, I think we have such a bright future with LI.FI and we have so many things planned and a very big vision. And marketplace execution is one of the hardest. It's a king discipline of business models. I think Amazon didn't do profits for the first 17 years or something, but there you go. And it's just, you have to onboard investors to that. And sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. Some understand, some don't want to understand. And obviously that's stressing us out. And we also needed to make sure we need revenue. We need revenue. One thing we learned is that the investor environment, the LP environment changed. People are more conservative. They want to see numbers. It's much more rare these days to raise a lot of money on a narrative. The fundamentals matter. And that was a tough learning over the past 2 years. There is $1 quadrillion coming on chain.
Jesus.
Everything will be tokenized. And we need to create a system for this future token economy that allows to go from any asset to any other asset via all the venues available, matchmaking, coordinating, being smart, multi-hopping, netting, peer-to-peer settling, optimizing this whole thing for applications, for finance, for software as a services, and especially for AI agents, right? I think this is a very big picture. It's very much the token economy and who is going to build the biggest gateway with a strong focus on being the gateway. And I think this is what we have been building since day one. And there is no other company in this space as well positioned as us to address this problem because our whole infrastructure from aggregation to putting things into auction to observe, to monitor, to optimize, to build risk and policy engines on top, being more compliant, being flexible. Our API is super flexible. We've been focusing on the enterprise since day one. And there's no one else on the market that can offer that. The single purpose players, technically, sure, like a bridge or a DEX aggregator, can go in that direction, but they are so stuck with competing on where they have to compete with in the first place, unless they do a 180-degree pivot and reallocate all the resources into a new direction. And then already they are late. We have 600 clients. We are perceived as this player already with all the large wallets from Phantom to a Binance, MetaMask to a Robinhood, Ledger, Gnosis Safe. They all use us for this already. And I think there is a big narrative to tell. and we're gonna be very loud around this soon, and then also address the next fundraise.
Cool. Makes sense. And then real quick, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how Kernel has been part of your journey and how Kernel might be able to support what you're doing now and in the future.
Kernel has been great. We started this thing coming out of a long phase of failed companies. So we had literally no money left. And we were, even still while building this company, we were freelancing on the side. And we were doing hackathons. And hackathons were nice in the beginning to build certain parts of the product, get some grant money, but it also always meant to build things outside the core focus. It was good for learning things, but not from an executional standpoint. And then Kernel was like really getting into the accelerator and all of that. It was really helpful to be able to to have a more focused period of time, spending time on the product, getting feedback from mentors, and then especially getting introduced to investors. I think that's how we got found. I think 1KX, who led our seed round, I think Peter found us via Kernel, and they led our seed round. So we found our seed investor. Funny enough, both of those founders were German as well. So they made it easier in this new industry to have VCs. Both partners were German. And it just what made it easier as well to just talk about things in the industry. And yeah, so incredibly grateful. And I got a bunch of business angels out of Kernel advisors as well. So I was leveraging this for fundraising. And yeah, great. Very grateful. And I think Kernel is a good starting point for anyone who wants to put a foot in this industry.